were part of a team that recently screened a documentary in Cape Town. It was called Boom, Bust, Boom, and it had everything to do with what I think many South Africans are concerned about, many people around the world are concerned about, and that is, when is the next recession going to hit? But before I ask you to give us the magic pill to that, why don't you tell us a little bit about the documentary?
Sure. So the documentary is nothing to do with us, in so much as we didn't have anything to do with making it. But about a year or so ago, I met Theo Kokken, who's one of the producers of the film in Johannesburg. And he told me about the film while we were meeting. And we found out that we had a lot of views in common about the way that economics and finance is taught at universities. And he told me that he was making the film with Terry Jones, which piqued my interest. I'm a great Monty Python fan. So a year or so later, he told me the film had been completed and would we like to have a screening in Cape Town. So I was all over it. I was really, really keen to do it, and I hosted the film.
Now, you've mentioned that it had Monty Python links. It was also quite a humorous topic, or a humorous take on a serious topic.
Yeah.
Why that way? Why did the filmmakers choose to go in that direction?
Well, it's a very serious concept, and a lot of economics and finance is quite opaque to people. There's a lot of complexity about it, and the jargon that's used is usually quite difficult to penetrate. So, and we wanted to involve our students, and it's a good way to get the attention of particularly our students to make it as humorous as possible in its delivery. But you're correct, it's an extremely serious topic. And what we're trying to do is to mobilize our students to question the way that they're being taught finance and economics at universities.
I think that is so fascinating because you're obviously an educator. You work with students very closely. What about the way we're teaching South Africa's next economics graduates, finance graduates need to be changed, in your opinion?
It's a hard thing to have an opinion about that is concise and clear, but I'll do my best. It's not per se a South African problem. Economics and finance is taught in an orthodox fashion almost throughout the world. And it's extremely difficult to challenge orthodoxy in an academic environment, and there's multiple reasons for that. So what we're trying to do is to get the students to mobilize and to demand change in some sense. And this film is a small beginning to that process. But there are worldwide student movements that we want to put our South African students in touch with, who are quite radical in their approach to demand for change.
What type of change are we asking for?
Well, again, this is my opinion about the models specifically that we teach. So it's important for me to say that I'm a financial mathematician and not an economist. So I don't want to garner the criticism of economics professors. But certainly the way that we approach finance and the way that we approach the teaching of it is sometimes highly simplistic. So the mathematical or statistical models that come out of it are linear. In other words, that they are quite straightforward approximations of relationships between various things. And in reality, it's an extremely complex space. And the models should be interdependent models. They should be highly nonlinear models. That means that we build into the models dependency. So when you look at the types of models that are used for controlling economies, they're too simple in their methodology to do it in an effective fashion in a world that's becoming more and more interlinked. So the power of these models came about in the 50s and 60s when the international economics were much more simple. And we haven't really caught up with that. There's a set of timescales that you have in finance and economics models that are mismatched as well. So many things like policy interventions take place over a certain timescale, whereas markets are taken over shorter and shorter timescales. And this causes a real mismatch in what the actual effect is. And you're trying to affect things, particularly through things like regulation. And behind regulation is the notion of models. It's like, how do we model this? and what is the most effective thing to do in a model in order to affect a real economy.
Let's go back then to the content of what was screened in this particular documentary. And many people, most people, don't want to go back to 2008, where we experienced a recession. And I know that you said before the cameras started rolling, somebody had asked you, so Professor, when are we going to experience the next one? And of course, I know it's not an easy question to answer, but I suppose what our viewers would want to know is, are we heading towards another one? Is it inevitable?
I think in the current state of economics in the world, unless we start really engaging with some of the behavioral aspects of what happens in financial markets and in economics, it's inevitable. But I just read a nice conclusion to a report from the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and there was a real nice piece in the paragraph where they said this is a man-made problem and we can find a solution to it. So as long as markets are as interconnected and fragile as they are, and as long as the interventions that can be made into markets are as limited and kind of drastic as they are, if we look at what's happening in China at the moment, the interventions are extremely drastic as their market moves up and down 10% intraday volatility at the moment. That fragility and the interconnectedness of things makes it an unstable system. And an unstable system is an anxious system. And that means that it can collapse. And it's not immediately obvious where the collapse could come from.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the African Institute of, let me get this right, Financial Markets and Risk Management? This is where you're from.
Sure. About 2 years ago, we had a bright idea with some of our donors. There are quite a number of financial institutions that donate money to universities. And the program that I had at the time receives good donor funding from financial institutions in South Africa. And we had a really good thing going, but we wanted to do a bigger thing. We wanted to have a larger impact on financial markets education in South Africa. So we spent 2 years scoping the appetite that people had for that, scoping the appetite that the corporate world had for that, and then scoping the appetite that they had for making large donations to universities to do something new. Unfortunately, all of those things came together. So after a 2-year period, we had raised quite a substantial amount of money. We went through the process at the university, which can be quite laborious, of creating a new institute. And then we hired staff. And the more people you have, the more good things you do. So the institute has sort of 3 areas of mandate. We work closely with the industry that supports us, and we do that in a number of ways. We provide education to postgraduate students, so we only take master's and PhD students into our programs. And we do research, some of it very academic research and some of it very, very applied research. And we keep a balance between those 3 activities.
If our viewers want to get more information about the Institute or perhaps contact the Institute, how can they do that?
We have a web page. We're part of UCT, so the Institute is embedded in the Faculty of Commerce. It's a university institute, so we answer to the formal structures of the university. So you can find us through the Commerce webpage of Cape Town University, or you can just Google the African Institute of Financial Markets and Risk Management, and you'll find us.